you or something.
Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Madness Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network with original programming and additional comic-related content.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Good evening, Wednesday Whammers. We had to begin again. We are so sorry for the delay. We pushed the button and it didn't start, so we started again. So here we are, live and kicking from our various offices.
This is such a great show. We had to start it twice.
We had to make sure we practiced it first.
Yes. So, anyways, welcome. So, welcome. We have the venerable artist Rob Davis drawing at the board. We have John Middich III, the writer of Sniper and Rook. And there's me. I am the colorist on Wolf Hunter. And yes, if you are looking for excellent comics, fulfilled comics, and comics now available from Diamond Distributing, previews, And your comic book shops, you can go ask your comic book shops, please carry Silverline. You go ask them and tell them we're in the previews. Pick up our books, grab them, grab them, grab them. And the first, I think the first series that's up and running in Diamond is Trumps, which is a fantastic series.
Yep.
And very, very, very fun book. And it's not about Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has everything to do with the card game called Trumps. If you play this game called Trumps, this comic book will make all the sense in the world to you. If you've never played Trumps, you're going to want to play Trumps after you've read this comic, because it sounds like a fun game. It's completely based off of that. And Roland Mann, the head honcho and CEO of Silverline, has written that, and it is a fun romp. Indeed. All right, gentlemen. So our topic this evening is 3D villains. How do we make a villain three-dimensional? And how do we make him interesting and not flat? And we had started discussing the ins and outs of how to build this character like this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will attempt to figure out how to make such a character, and maybe if we're up for it, maybe we can create some villain from scratch and do some noodling and see what we come up with. Does that sound like a plan?
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So I initially started off the conversation with the Joker's the preeminent villain in comics, but how do you create something that's outside of that? How do you create something that's not him?
Well, and as we were discussing when we thought we were live, we were talking about how the villain should be a cracked mirror reflection of the hero in some fashion. And in the case that we were talking about Spider-Man, and how I think Dr. Octopus was probably the first real dangerous nemesis for Spider-Man, but then after the Green Goblin came along, he kind of got surpassed. But I always think of Dr. Octopus as the quintessential Spider-Man villain. But and every villain that he has, at least early on, was creature based in some fashion. There was the octopus, there was a goblin, which is kind of a creature, and then there was the lizard, and what was the other? Scorpion. That's the one I was trying to remember. And you would think the Scorpion would probably have been, if he'd been written a different way, could have been the quintessential, because he kind of makes sense. He's an arachnid-like character as well, like Spider-Man is. But it just matters who was writing what at the time, and how he worked or didn't work with the public. And I think Green Goblin was such a sadistic. He had these plans going on, and his plans were in the background for several issues before we even found out, even had an inkling of who he might be. And as I understand it, some of the difficulties between Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the two guys who created Spider-Man, they had differing opinions of who the Green Goblin was going to be in the end, what his secret identity was. So I don't know what Ditko thought it was going to be, but since after Ditko left, it turned out to be who it was. Then, but there was some sort of discussion between them as to who was supposed to be it, and there was that was part of the breakup, I think, is what I've been told about when Steve Ditko left, amongst other things. But yeah, how do you create a three-dimensional villain to go up against your hero?
And
a cracked mirror version.
When we first started talking about this, Rob, when we had our initial run through, I thought it was really interesting because you and I both pounced on this, and we both agreed with the cracked mirror idea. but I'm a writer, you're an artist, and we both looked at the same concept, but different aspects of it. You went visual, all right? So Spider-Man, spider, arachnid, you got scorpions, you mentioned vultures before, you know, chameleon was in issue 1, for God's sake. You know, I was thinking, you know, creating the villain, not so much the name or the visual, but the how did they come to be? How did they get the powers? And those guys also had that, you know, so they not only had the cracked mirror of it being animal, insect-like, but Doc Ock, scientific experiment gone bad. Green Goblin, serum gone bad. Why was the Scorpion so pissed off? Because he was working for J. Jonah Jameson to try to bring Spider-Man in and couldn't get out of the suit. It got bonded to him. Rhino, pretty much the same thing. You know, we haven't brought up Rhino yet. So, you know, as you're looking at the visuals and seeing it, I'm looking at the storylines and seeing it. And I think the coolest thing I'm going to take away from tonight's conversation is that is the epitome of why comics are so awesome, because it's the fusion of art and writing and different perspectives that a team brings to the story.
It's storytelling. It's storytelling. And I consider myself a storyteller. I'm a visual storyteller. I do better when I have someone who's more versed in the intricacies of writing, you know, figuring out foreshadowing and many of the things that I'm not even aware of with writing about structure and those sorts of things. But I do know how to tell a story visually. So if I get between my visual storytelling and someone who's got a really good writing storytelling, it can that's the power of comic books, is the fusion of those two things, words and pictures. It doesn't work the same in film. It doesn't work the same in television, even though it seems like it should be similar, but it doesn't. It works differently in comics than it does in those visual mediums. And that's a topic probably for another broadcast or stream, is that we could talk about what is it about comics that's so different from other storytelling mediums. But that's it. You came at it from, even though we were saying the same thing about Cracked Mirror, I was coming at it visually. You were coming at it. How did this guy become the way he is? Why is he the villain?
And that's kind of where I think
what cracked him, you know.
And I think that sometimes when creating a 3-dimensional villain, I think sometimes that's where some things go awry, where there might be an awesome visual. Like, you know, somebody sketches out a character, looks badass. But if there's not a compelling reason for that person to become either a hero or a villain, you know, it's like, okay, an awesome design, but it's like a hollow suit on the inside. You know, so how do we make that, you know, how do we flesh that out, make them 3D? You know, what is the reason for them to be there to fight our hero? What is the motivation for us to put them in the story other than because it looks cool? Bless you.
Well, I've had a chest cold for a little over a week now. So excuse me because I'm going to cough every once in a while. But yeah, go ahead.
So bringing up Spider-Man's villains. So one of the one that kind of comes to the forefront is is the Green Goblin, not the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin, kind of like a variation on Green Goblin, but so it's interesting though that the Green Goblin kind of comes to the forefront partly because he is more fleshed out than the other villains somewhat. So like what makes him stick out more than say Sandman or Rhino? Like Rhino looks cool, but like Green Goblin has staying power. Sandman is an interesting idea, but Green Goblin has staying power. So like what is it that what were the dimensional things that were added to him that makes him
Yeah, that's what makes him a true nemesis for Spider-Man. He is truly fully three-dimensional. Dr. Octopus, when he first showed up, was kind of two-dimensional. I mean, he had the fact that he used these extra arms to work with radioactive materials, which is that's an actual scientific thing that especially they did back then. So they had a machine like that, and he had dials on the front that he worked them with. But and so that got fused to his body, and it kind of cracked him, kind of like the movie Dr. Octopus did. But it's a little different, but it's similar. And so that's kind of three-dimensional. But then you get to the Green Goblin, who we dived into him really deep. And got a lot more about what he was about. So that's the kind of character we're talking about making.
And there's another reason,
deep a 3D character.
And the difference, and this is, in my humble opinion, why Goblin was the one as opposed to any of the other ones. The Goblin was not just shoved into Spider-Man's world. He wasn't just Spider-Man's nemesis. He became fused into Spider-Man and Peter Parker's lives. So,
right.
Because Rob, you were talking earlier during our pre-game show that, about you brought up Harry, his son, so not only did Green Goblin pose a threat, as he's throwing pumpkin bombs, but there was that on the edge of your seat anticipation going, oh crap, you got this madman who is in the same apartment visiting his son with our hero there, because the two were roommates for a little while. So you're like, okay, what's going to happen? So the connection, and that's done through writing, the connection between the hero and the villain, that was the distinguishing feature between for the Goblin, as opposed to the other ones that really kind of set him apart. And from that, he was ingrained into every part of Peter / Spidey's life, and that's where the huge threat came from. And the worst thing that could happen to Spider-Man is somebody from his Peter Parker life gets hurt, and we know that's what happened to the most perfect girl in all of comicdom, Gwen Stacy, when Goblin offed her. So,
yeah, I still think MJ was his girl, but okay.
Well, at least you won't have to fight over the comic women that don't exist anyway.
Personally, I was smitten with Gwen Stacy too.
Yeah, me too.
I thought, I kind of fell in love with her, but I think they didn't know quite where to take her, so they killed her off. But at the same time, that also deepened the relationship, the protagonist antagonist relationship between Spider-Man and Green Goblin. So
at least for one issue before the Goblin died too. Sorry about spoilers from 1975, folks.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen in the movie,
until they brought him back too. That was one of them that stayed that.
So in Spider-Man's case, for the Green Goblin anyway, I guess one of the key things that adds a lot of dimension to the character is the fact that he actually has a personal relationship with the character outside of being Spider-Man. So in their human interactions, they actually know each other, and his best friend is the son, right? Or his good friend is the son.
No. His best friend and roommate at some point.
Yeah.
Right.
Peter moved in with Harry. Yeah.
So adding that personal, immediate connection creates a lot of dimension immediately, and then starting to add motivations into that character as to who and what he is about. I'm not 100% sure what was his motivating factors other than all the comics I ever read. He was always in character as the Green Goblin, so I never really caught on to what his business. I knew he was a businessman.
The movie with Tobey Maguire came pretty close to how it was in the comics as well. He was he was a scientist. and he was also a ruthless businessman. And at some point he cracked. I forget whether it was actually
because
in the movie. It was because of in the movie. It was because of the serum, and I'm thinking that's
comics too.
Also true. Is that I couldn't remember? It's that. I mean, this is
Spidey was my bully growing up. He's the reason I started collecting.
But I haven't read those books since I was a little kid, so I didn't remember exactly what the whole thing was about. But yeah, I figured it was similar to the movie. But yeah, and we can also just to throw something in because I thought of it here as another one of the greatest Marvel villains ever is Dr. Doom. And at first he's just a guy in a costume in an iron suit, but once we learn his origin, he and Reed Richards were roommates in college. So again, there's the roommate in college thing that kind of melds them together.
They had competition,
and they were rivals. Yeah,
and the whole superhero world is interesting, and it's kind of hard for some people to wrap their heads around about dual identities, because how many of us run around the world as two separate people with two different identities and two different personalities? I mean, it's not very it's not very common, right? So the whole idea of
how you look at it, but
is separate from Spider-Man, or going along with oh crap, I just lost what I was gonna say. Rob, which one were you saying?
Well, I kind of agree with that. Is that most people don't run around with, dressing up in a different costume. But I kind of subscribe to the whole idea that depending on who we're with, we show a different face to everyone.
True, absolutely.
So there's the me that's in here, that I know. But there's also the me that I show to everyone around me. And it changes because of who I'm talking to. Because of the relationship I have with them, I open up different aspects of my personality to each person that I know well. So in some ways, that's kind of what comic books are investigating, is the different sides of our character. And I mean, it's simplifying it into, here's Batman, here's Bruce Wayne. Here's Iron Man, here's Tony Stark. And
that's where we were. We were Richard Von Doom versus Reed Richards, as that they're enemies, quote unquote, challenging each other prior to superpowers factoring in. And so when you have somebody that is basically a nemesis to both of your identities,
right?
And that have become ingrained in both of your lives, your superhero life, versus and your human, regular civilian self, that really poses the biggest threat. The problem that you have as a writer, even though we know, like, Martin, you had said, like, that personal connection to the hero, you can't have everybody connected to everybody at the time.
No,
otherwise, stupid, like they were doing at Star Wars for a while. Like this one, make fun of it during Spaceballs. I'm the mother's brother's nephew's roommate barber. What does that make us? So you've got to temper it with some villains that would have that resonating power, like goblins, and some that would be less fleshed out, like our scorpions or shockers. And then you get the ones that are completely throwaway people, like the one issue that I started collecting with, where it said, "When cometh the commuter," and it was a guy who took the train out to the suburbs. I don't even remember what that I brought that one up on a few months back when it was a hoot. Spidey was trying to swing from tree to tree in the suburbs, and he ran into a cat or something. It was bizarre. So, for a good story,
I don't think I was reading Spider-Man at that point.
You got to have a mix, But that a connection to a hero, a mirror image of the hero, broken mirror, either from origin or from belief structure or something, and the best heroes will have an assortment of awesome villains from different areas and aspects. Yeah, that.
Yeah, like the Mole Man for the Fantastic Four. Mm-hmm. It was the first villain they fought, and then Doctor Doom later, and the Submariner, and then we had Miracle Man, and we had Infant Terrible, and it just it just seemed like, especially in Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee coming up with just these great different villains every issue. Now every once in a while they'd have a clunker, but it would be just a toss off for that issue. But
you know what I remember
there were
most?
So many great villains created back then.
You know what I remember most about Submariner? About him having a thing for Sue Richards.
Yes, yeah.
So again, it's the villain
that connection again, you know,
messing around with
Reed's honey. Yep.
The entity. Yeah. So, ruh-roh. Okay.
Okay.
Did I lose you guys? Do you guys lose me?
Yeah, you're back.
You're glitching a little bit. It's no big deal. You've been glitching all along. Max, we just have to start calling you Max Headroom.
So now, if we want to dive into. If we want to dive into the world of villains, I mean, Batman has the best, probably the best villains in all of comics. And so, what would distinguish how, other than the fact that he has villains, like what distinguishes each villain from the other? Like what makes Penguin, other than the fact that he looks like a penguin, different than the Joker, different from the Two-Face? What is it, the motivations of these characters that kind of comes to the fore that differentiates each? Because their motivations are slightly different. But they all generally steal.
Yeah, well, in the 40s and 50s, in the pre-Silver Age comics, especially, the Catwoman, and they played up this heavily in the Batman TV show. The villains would try to steal things that were aspects of their character. Like Catwoman would be going out and stealing statues from the Egyptian. The cat statues from Egyptian times that are very valuable, and the Penguin would be doing things associated with birds, and the Riddler would just be stealing stuff, and just so he could leave a riddle for Batman to solve. So it was those sorts of things, but it just depends. I think. Later in the 60s and 70s, we started developing these characters that had some character flaw that turned them into a villain. Like in the case of Dr. Doom, what put him finally over the edge is an explosion put a big scratch on his face, and he cracked because he was so vain that he couldn't handle the fact that he had a scratch on his face, and he tried to blame Reed Richards for it because Richard tried to warn him about it, about that he was going off into territories that he might blow up the school, and he ended up blowing up their room and scratching his face, and he goes staggering off and goes, and so that's when his mirror cracked completely. He was not a good person before that, but he turned into a supervillain at that moment when he scratched his face. Now he eventually got the hot mask and really scarred the crap out of his face, but that was the thing that put him over the edge. In the case of Dr. Octopus, it's the fact that he became attached to those arms, and that's when he cracked. And the Lizard cracked when his serum to try and regrow his arm turned him into a lizard type creature. So he became a lizard brained person at that point. And when we get to Clayface with Batman, that's also a chemical that altered him, and that cracked his personality. So yeah, it's some precipitating event or something about their personalities. Whereas before it was a gimmick. It was a gimmick. What gimmick can I'm going to go steal cat things because I'm Catwoman. I'm going to go steal bird things because I'm Penguin, and those sorts of things. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
they're all
matured
kind of
over the
cracks.
years.
But
Yeah, they've completely matured, and the storytelling has certainly matured. Especially, you cited, the Batman TV show, which I grew up on reruns of that. I love that show. I've got the DVDs. I got the Blu-rays.
I didn't realize it when I was a little kid, but it's comedy. It's satire. It's comedy. But I thought it was serious. But then toward the end, I'm going, wait a minute, they've worn this out.
I had a serious crush on that
anymore.
We'll go there, and I don't think anybody else didn't though. So yeah, she was kind of gorgeous. One of the things that Barb, our Empress of Inks, had said in the chat, make sure that we bring up. And I had thrown in the chat. I'm like, ooh, I have a difference of opinion on that one. So this could be something that we could talk about. Barb had said, and I've heard this one before, and she makes a good point, that some of the best villains in current writing are ones that you could empathize with. The ones that you could actually have feelings.
They have a reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable reason to be the way they are. And any one of us could be that. Yeah.
Yep. And I get scared with that, because teaching, I've got a background in history. So, through the years, to understand history, you have to understand the people who are doing things. For example, and one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm trying to explain to a lot of people, throw it out there, Vladimir Putin. A lot of people are saying, he's evil, he's bad, villain, right? Well, I could explain to people why he's doing what he's doing. Yes. I could make a logical explanation, and everybody goes, that makes sense. That sounds good. Now, it doesn't validate why he's doing what he's doing. It does not say I agree with what he's
got the underlying reasons for what he does.
I
don't agree with them, and most people don't agree with them, but he's got reasons for doing what he does.
Empathizing with all villains, that and we see it in the real world, and I think that's why I'm so sensitive to it. As media is having us sympathize with villains, and as media and real world start meshing more and more, kind of like you were talking Max Headroom with me glitching earlier, it's like, where are things starting and where are things ending? There seems to be like only gray lately, where it's like, we can't call evil anymore. It's like, that's messed up. So I when I write, I try to.
Yeah, the problem is drawing the line where something crosses from being bad to evil.
Yeah. At what point is it like, okay, now I was sympathetic with you until this, and once you're past that point, I can't go along with you anymore. Yeah.
Right. And, so can you ever empathize with the Joker?
They made him empathetic. Killing Joke.
But in the last movie where with Joaquin Phoenix played him, yes, you could
right.
In the comics, he's a psychopath.
No. But Batman: The Killing Joke with with Brian Bolandart, and I'm forgetting the writer. I apologize.
I didn't much care for that, to be honest.
He was a comedian that wasn't making money. He had a wife and a baby, and he's trying to make a living, and he fell in with like these bad guys who were all wearing this this red hood, red mask.
Yeah, red
and
hood.
He was, they said, okay, go on in and do this job, and he fell into that vat and went crazy. Mm-hmm. So it's like that one. Up to that point, you were empathizing with them. I mean, like, if any of us had a wife and a child and there's no money and there's no food, I think that some of us would be willing to break some laws to try to make sure that our family survives. I'm not going to go steal a TV, but, it's like maybe a loaf of bread. Okay, somebody can empathize with that. But when you start poisoning water supplies to kill people or deform them to have horrific, that's that line of demarcation we were talking about, Rob. Right there. It's like,
pretty obvious.
Can't follow you on that one, man. Too crazy.
Yeah. So once the villain crosses a certain line into and you understand what that character represents in all its totality, then you can no longer empathize with them. You have to go, okay, whoa, this is too far. Now, as a foil, or as a warning, or as a cautionary tale, then they become a dimensional character in that level, and they then inform you that, okay, this is wickedness and evilness in its entirety, and now you can kind of see the embodiment of it in the visualization, and you go, oh, okay, I understand that.
I get it now.
I stay away from this. So yeah.
There's something else that Barb had said in the chat, which ties in beautifully here too. Understanding the villain's motivation. Understanding it, being able to explain it, without justifying or agreeing is definitely a key. We talked about that point of demarcation. And as I was using like the example about different world leaders, most villains see themselves as the heroes in their own stories.
Yes.
And I read something on Facebook, the repository of all good knowledge, right? But it made so much sense. And it really hit me. It said, you are the villain in somebody else's story. And I'm like, wow. I've been teaching for 27 years. I'm sure that there's a few students out there that don't like me still. Anybody who's ever been through a breakup, I'm sure that maybe there's somebody has an ex out there that just goes, nope, bad guy, bad girl. It's all about perspective. So even as we're talking here today, when I brought up the example about world leaders, that's from my perspective of an American, and somebody in that country might look at it differently. So yeah, perspective, plays a lot into it too. So when you're writing, you also have to know your target audience and who you're reaching out to, when you're creating your villains, to make sure that any empathy to a point, then to, understanding but not agreeing, will resonate with that group, that it would be something that they could connect to. To have that emotional tie to make the villain, somebody you care about or, find interesting enough to want to keep reading about. Yeah. Martin, you look perplexed.
No, it's just it's profound. Particularly when you start talking about the morality of the characters and where good and evil lie. You can end up in very deep territory.
Oh God! Yeah.
It just kind of triggered a thought that there's some movies that I've seen where I'm not sure if that's the intent of the movie, but the intent of the movie, the seeming intent of some movies that I've seen, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but there's some movies where I went and I watched it, and then after I left, I was like, was the idea of that movie to make me actually empathize so much so with the villain that I'm supposed to now internalize the idea that I can do this too? There's some movies that have left me with that feeling like, oh, hang on a second, Matt, this is dangerous because.
Did you ever see the movie? Did you ever see the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas?
Yes, I did.
I saw that in the 90s, and it scared the living bejesus out of me. He's just a dad, and I think he was separated from his wife. It was his daughter's birthday, wanted to see her. Traffic's backed up. Crappy day at work. He just kind of snaps, leaves his car on the expressway, goes walking off, wants to go and get money for a payphone. And the clerk won't give him money. He won't break a bill. And then he goes off on the clerk and steals the clerk's club. Then he walks and he has his briefcase, and then some gangbangers come up to him, and he wasn't having it. And he started beating the crap out of them with the stick. And then now he has an Uzi, and the day just progressed, and because life is just pissing on this guy, and it's like, I was watching that. I'm like, oh, that's going to be me one day. So it's like, now, as Martin, as you're saying, are we supposed to sympathize going, ooh, I could see me doing that? Or is it a cautionary tale of, wow, things could be a slippery slope quickly. Don't allow yourself to come to the dark side of the Force.
So in that case, that's a cautionary tale. But there's other movies where they leave it more nebulous, right? And you walk out and you stand there and you're like, hang on a second. Did they just kind of tell me that I can do this too, or I can be this too, and I should be this? And that's kind of like, oh, okay, hang on. So I think that also means that we as writers or creators of comic books, when we create something like this, we have to take that responsibility seriously, because when developing such a character, and this is where the dimensions come in, right? You have to add in the elements that make the character human, but you also have to add in the elements that say, okay, whoa, this is too far, right? And make them realize that I never become like this.
I think that's an important thing about making a three-dimensional character, is that you understand that could have easily have been me. If I had the pressures on me and I was in that particular situation, I could have become that. I think that's what you're feeling. That's the problem you're having, John, and I think that's the issue you're having, Martin, with those types of characters. I think the best films are the ones that make you pause and stop and think about things after you've walked out of the movie. They haunt you for at least 2 or 3 days afterwards. It's like, have you guys seen the movie American Beauty?
Yes.
I know of it. I've never seen it.
Yeah, and it starts off with the main character. You're definitely sympathizing with him, but as you go into this, get deeper and deeper into the story, and he starts falling into this moral cesspool. He's being dragged in, and you're being dragged in with him. Good point, Jim. What you forget is at the very beginning of the film, with the narration, he's narrating his story. He essentially tells you, this is the last week of my life. So, but you forget about that as you're going into the story. Then you get to the end, and I hope I'm not spoiling this for anybody, but he gets killed.
It's 25 years ago plus. Yeah, it's safe.
Yeah, it's long enough ago. It shouldn't. But if you haven't seen this movie, and I don't really think it spoils it all that much for you, because it's the journey through the story that's so important. But after I watched that movie in the theater, I thought about the issues in it for a week. They tumbled around in my head for a week. And that's a good film to me, is one that makes you stop and reevaluate your life and think about, that could have been me. How do I avoid becoming that?
One of the things that I think we really need to look at is comics. Okay, like us in Silverline, right? None of us are independently wealthy from the comic books we do. Okay, when I was self-publishing, I lost money. I said, some people gamble their money away. Some people drink their money away. I print comic books.
I comic book mine away.
Yeah, that's a much better problem to have if you're asking me. But Marvel, the big two, they're in it for the money. And there's a saying, that villains don't sell comic books. And yes, I know Joker had one in the 70s. So if you take a look at most of the villains traded in the no, let's go with Venom. Yeah, because that's a problem. That's where I'm going with this. If you take a look, tell me a damn good villain over the last 30 years. They do not have the resonance that the old school guys do, because too many of them have been written in a way that they quickly turn into an anti-hero. So very Punisher-esque. So Venom, I was working in the comic stores at the time when they came out with Venom, Lethal Protector. Venom shouldn't be protecting anything except for his desire to eat Spider-Man's brain. Okay? It's like, no. Don't push him out. He's supposed to be Venom. He's supposed to be awesome. So many of the villains these days are unmemorable because they're riding that line between, you know, good and bad, so we can put these anti-heroes in books and make money. You know, one of the things that I loved, and I'm 99% sure that it was Liefeld with Deadpool when they were doing the information files in the back of some of the early X-Force books about Deadpool. Even there, because he was a mercenary, started off as a mercenary bad guy, came out to get Cable because he was working for some guy named Tolliver. And they even said in like the dossier that he was known to change sides in a battle, in the middle of a battle, if he got a better offer. That, it was, to me, that was awesome. I thought that was great, because that's like, he's not driven by ideology, he's driven by money. And so
that's,
like, okay,
that's during the era of comic books written
so I really like
professional wrestling.
You know, and I was like, okay, that I'm 99%
the villains were pretty two-dimensional for the most part.
But yeah,
but
so
that is an interesting concept, though.
You know, and they have gone through, you know, and taken like Magneto. Magneto over the years has become much more relatable, you know, as they delved into his Jewish ancestry and Auschwitz and, you know, the Holocaust. You know, so that made him much more relatable. And these days, Magneto is absolutely, you know, we could sympathize and we can empathize with him on that, because that was horrific. I mean, that's
always agree with him.
Humanity ever did, you know. But when he was originally created, there was a clear line of good, bad, and then as fans started writing and adding flavors to characters to flesh them out more, to make them more 3D, the fact that they were already established, you know, as good, bad, allowed people to play around with that ambiguity, as opposed to creating a villain from scratch who's designed to be ambiguous just so you could put them in a book and make money.
So what do you need to add to a character to get beyond, like, he murders people and he steals, right? Like, what is it that adds the extra dimensions that I mean, you've alluded to some of it already, but this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Like, so, okay, well, most bad guys are either stealing something, or either killing somebody, or they're, you know.
Yeah, what's their basic motivation?
So
motivation,
is it greed
and morality.
Is it greed, or is it revenge? Is it you know, those are the two biggies: greed and revenge,
or those who think that they're doing the right thing, you know, for the betterment of humanity.
Thanos,
now, if we want to go, so Thanos, what's Thanos' motivation? What's he about?
He's gone around. He's a conqueror. He's gone around the universe, and he's seen that there are a lot of people who are starving and suffering in the universe, and he thinks the way to solve that is to eliminate half of the people that are in the universe, so those who are left can live better lives. That's Thanos. That's Thanos's, at least in the movies. That's his motivation. In the comic books, he was in love with death and was trying to impress her by killing half the people in the universe. But I think the movie version works on a better level, because you can empathize with
why would you only want to kill? Why would you only want to kill half the universe instead of the entire universe if he's in love with death?
Martin, think about it this way. Okay,
that's it.
Think about it this way, Martin. Okay, however much money you make an hour, think about your day job. All right.
Sure.
All right. And whatever industry any of us are in, there are other people in our industry. And as we have more supply and demand, as we have more supply of workers, the demand stays the same. There's a supply, so wages go down because they could pick. So if we snap half the people gone, wages go up because now there's competition.
Right, but
and there's the resources.
Think about how many people don't have
essentially
food
doubled
and
the resources.
Water. Now the natural resources are being used by only half.
Here's the flip side of that. What that, you know, a good person would think, okay, well, that we have too many people, then let's double the resources.
Yeah, that's what everybody was saying afterwards.
Like, that's
Thanos,
the flip
just
side.
do that. Make every planet twice as big, make every sun twice as big, and just double everything.
Let's double the resources instead of eliminating half the people.
So the flaw for Thanos for me is like, well, what does he get out of it? Like, he kills half the universe. What does he get?
That's exactly it. He sees himself as the hero because he's the savior. And the difference between there is one fundamental difference between snapping and making half go away and doubling resources. If anybody has ever been in a tight spot, and somebody else bails you out, you didn't necessarily learn your lesson. So if Thanos were to double everything, how long until we'd be here again? But with the blip, make half of them go away, indiscriminately. It was just random, supposedly. And so now people are going to remember what happened. And maybe, one of my favorite movies, Heathers, Christian Slater doing his best Jack Nicholson impression said, like, the extreme always seems to make an impression, So that's me doing a bad Christian Slater doing a bad Jack Nicholson, But yeah, so that's pretty extreme, maybe enough to get people to change their ways. And Thanos is thinking that he's helping the universe. He's helping people, and the people who remain will benefit from it. TV show. Do you guys remember Sliders? Came out in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Oh, Jim, we'll come back to that. That's a good idea. If there's no life, there's no death. Balance. Yeah. Luke talked to Rey about that in The Last Jedi. Extreme good, extreme bad, cold, hot, the whole thing. Between it all, you've got balance. And where was I going before that one? It's been a long day, brothers.
I don't know, man.
It's the Admiral.
I lost track too. I thought I knew where you were going. Then you took a left turn. So
yeah, I do that a lot. God.
Well, now
what makes a villain three-dimensional? So what makes them three-dimensional is that they have an understandable motivation.
Yes.
You can empathize with them to a certain extent. You can understand, so you understand where they're coming from.
And
you might not agree with them, but you would at least understand where they're coming from.
And you can empathize to a degree until they hit that line.
And generally they are as I said from the beginning, a cracked mirror version of the hero. So they're a reflection of the hero in some fashion. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the exact opposite, but they're a cracked mirror reflection of the hero in the piece. So yeah.
And then Rob, I'm gonna jump to the artist side now, because now you're talking the writer side. I'm gonna go back to your side.
I am.
They have to look awesome. They have to have a cool
they
visual.
Have to look cool, yeah.
Because you can have like the most intriguing character, but with comic books being such a visual medium, they have to look cool. They have to. The design has to be sharp and on point. They have to be visually appealing. Something to drag you in.
Manifestation of their power
that way
is awesome. Yeah.
Because people don't.
Because a lot of times they're just a plain looking guy, and then they wave their magic wand or whatever, and this awesome thing happens. So you've got that visually going on. It doesn't.
Let's face it,
not necessarily a costume or something, but something visually awesome about them. Yeah.
Because comic books on the rack, people do not buy a brand new comic as they're looking through the rack going, oh, I perceive that one's going to have a great story inside. No, they get grabbed by the visual. So if the visual is there and then the underlying story is solid, that again goes back to the winning combination.
Yeah, even a lot of times, especially back in the 50s and 60s early on, sometimes the story inside didn't match the cover at all.
True.
It's what grabbed you and got you to pick up the comic and look and see what was on the inside. So you had to have both aspects. You had to have something on the outside that would grab them visually and get them to look at it, and then you had to have a story inside that could be picked up fairly quickly by just looking at the first couple of pages and go, "Oh, this is interesting. I'm going to buy it." So
I got to work with.
We don't have that aspect today, because most people don't buy them off of as something. Oh, I'm walking through the dime store or through the drugstore, and I see a spinner rack.
Food store for me in junior high.
It's an impulse buy. That's not an impulse buy anymore. You have to go to a comic book shop or go to an online store to look for the book that you want to buy. So it's a whole different aspect now than it used to be.
There was I got to work with an amazing artist for Sniper and Rook Volume 1, Number 6, a gentleman named Rob. Phenomenal artist. Oh my God. The book is beautiful. And he shared with me his take on how he does covers, because he said it was shared with him one time. And I'll pass it along to the internet. And it came from Rob Nicolakis up in Canada. Hey, Martin, you probably know him because you're in Canada too. You guys all know each other, right? Eh?
Yeah.
I love Canada. But what Rob said that he heard and loved, and I've passed it along for 20 some years, is as an artist, you should make the cover be the panel in the comic book that you wanted to draw, but you didn't have the opportunity to. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. I mean, that is so cool.
That's an interesting take, yeah. Or I generally, on my covers, I'll usually take a panel inside the book and maybe redraw it from a different aspect to give it even more visual impact than it had on the inside of the book. Every panel should have some sort of visual impact. Every page.
Yes.
Not every panel has to have impact, but every page has to have impact.
And every page, the bottom right-hand corner should have a mini cliffhanger to make you want to turn the page. Amen to that.
Either visually or with, somebody, the character says, and then I'm going to ... Oh, wait, what's he going to do? Right. So you go to the next page. It should have a page turning, a cliffhanger aspect of that sort. Or you're so involved in the movie or in the what's happening in the book, you'll go, what's next? So yeah, there's many ways to do that. But
so I don't know how much this adds to the dimensionality of the character, but when it comes to comics and the visualization, the character needs to be the embodiment of the entirety of what the idea is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, like when you see the Joker, the visual of the Joker, everything that the Joker is embodied in that visual. When you see what you're
saying.
When you see the Craven the Hunter, everything that you see is in that character.
Animal pelt, gun, he's a hunter. Yes.
So
Venom, you see it's basically evil Spider-Man. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything that character symbolizes needs to be there, and you know instantly what it is when you see it. So that goes to the discussion of needs to be visually awesome, right? So you need to resonate as to who and what he is, or otherwise you have no idea.
Should be readable almost instantly as to what they are.
Readable visually, right, Rob?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Read it visually. That you look at him and you go, oh, that's Dr. Doom. Oh, that's Dr. Octopus. Oh, that's
or even Goblin. A new character. You see him in there, you look at him, and you're like, okay, that's a bad guy.
That's a bad guy, and he's interesting. Yeah. Well, let's find out more about him. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, but that's a very good point, John, about that making the cover a panel you couldn't draw inside the book that you wanted to but couldn't because the storytelling didn't allow that particular thing. So you could take that aspect of the book and put it on the cover as a draw to get people to see it. Yeah.
So Jim is making some suggestions as to what you can do with your composition.
Some very good comments throughout.
Yeah, there are also tricks of composition, lighting, etc. tracked for setup, for example, like the triangle composition, and then use the
or another one is a
circle
circle
in the eye, rules of thirds, etc., etc. Yeah. So
using the very stark 1 point perspective to draw you in, foreshortening,
what I'd love to do, because I just had a thought in my mind, and if I started bouncing to that, we'd be here another hour, and Roland says, don't do 2 hours, and we listen to that Honcho.
Well, we got started late, so we could run a little over, but
I wouldn't mind. We are already at like a real hour on recording, and thank you all for sticking with us today. We have Silverline, appreciate that. I wonder how many and what we could come up with. Let's not do it now. Let's save it for another night. Have there been?
We don't have time tonight.
Have there been in comics true villains, not anti-heroes, but true villains that have been able to redeem themselves enough to become a hero?
I can think of one right off.
Rob, I've got one in my head too, and it makes me think of you. So maybe we're thinking of the same one.
It could be. Yeah, could be. It's from the Avengers.
Nope, I'm talking. Okay. I was thinking about your favorite person that you seem to. He seems to be your favorite person that you've been talking about tonight. So.
Okay.
Doc Ock took over Peter Parker's body.
In the movie. Yeah, in the movie.
Oh, not in the movie. No. When he wound up taking over Peter Parker's body, because his body was dying.
I missed that whole story.
And then he became the superior Spider-Man to prove he could do it better. Yeah. But then he started going, oh shit, this is what this is really like. And started to understand and started becoming like a hero on the inside. So I would love to have a talk one time about reformed villains. Have any? And then,
like I said, I thought of
we
at
need to
least
do that for another one.
In the Avengers.
And then do they do that, and why?
All right, so I guess we've kind of walked our way through this one.
Completely exhausted this, but we've come pretty close.
Yeah. So
at least where we were going tonight. So.
Yeah. So if you're going to make a character, you got to make him kind of cool. Make sure that he's embodied. The idea of what he is he or she is embodied in the entirety of the character.
The image.
Give them some empathetic elements, or at least up to a certain point where
or at least an understandable motivation. Yeah,
an understandable motivation, and perhaps a direct connection to the hero themselves. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but
it seems like the bigger ones are have that sort of connection now. Like in the Joker in the first Batman film, is the one who killed Bruce Wayne's parents.
I hated that they did that.
Connections.
I hated that so much.
It took a while. I went, okay. Yeah. But
I'm going to throw. Sorry, Martin. I'm going to throw you off. Just since you guys were mentioned Venom earlier and how they made him an anti-hero, and that was not the original intention. When he first showed up in those Todd McFarlane issues of ASM, he shows up at the door, knocking on the door of Aunt May's house as Eddie Brock, coming to see Peter. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier today, the villain has embedded himself in both the hero's life and the civilian's life. So yeah, that's a big part too. If they're multi-threaded villains, that have become a problem to all aspects of their life in both their superhero identity and their civilian identity, that carries some major weight. He terrorized Mary Jane. That's why she wouldn't let Spidey have his black suit ever again.
All right. I missed a lot of that back in the day, I guess, but that's interesting.
I did for the most part. I'm somewhat aware of that particular storyline, but that was during a period when I wasn't reading many Marvel comics. So, but yeah, there was interesting stuff's happening then. Yeah.
So now, if you want to be reading comics, you want to be reading Silverline books.
You know why? Because we have great villains and great heroes
and good storytelling.
And as Martin said, Trump's is not about Donald Trump. But if you like Donald Trump, you are going to love that book. And if you don't like Donald Trump, you're going to love that book.
You're going to love that book.
Everybody's going to love that book.
It's a great
100%.
It really is. And check out the previews. Some people already have copies of previews, and it is unlike I buy my comics online, and they've already got the previews online. So, and I've ordered it. Even though I have a copy of it, I ordered another one because it's going to be a little different from the newsstand or from the Kickstarter.
From the Kickstarter, right?
Yeah. So I'm interested to see it.
If you do tell your retailers, you know, hey, Silverline, you know, I'd love to check out their book. Could you please order these number 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, you know, for my pull bin? You know, ask your retailer, you know, can you order a couple for the shelf too? Because, not everybody's going to read previews. And these books really do deserve a wider audience. These are made with love and care for, the media.
Even the ones we didn't work on. Even the ones we didn't
absolutely.
work on.
Yeah.
So I think Silverline puts out great books, or I wouldn't be doing things with them.
So here's a way to look at it. If you're missing heroes being heroes and villains being villains, look up Silverline, and we will fit that bill for you. So, all right. Well, gentlemen, it's been an interesting chat this evening. We can ponder our villainy, and hopefully we give some people insights into how to make their villains, and we will hopefully you can go look up our Silverline books, look them up in previews, ask your comic shops to start ordering the books and get them in your physical hands. All right, gentlemen, let's do this. Hang on, let me just
make mine Silverline.
My name is Ross Ritchie from Boom Studios, and make mine Silverline.